This week on The Record,
The state of our union is strong.
President Trump's pitch on prices, but will voters buy his prescription for the pain they feel?
No. What they've led to is increase in taxes for working people all across this country.
House Democrat Nikki Budzinski reacts. Long overdue. The infamous car stranded downtown, racking up nearly 9,000 in tickets, now gone. We dig deeper into the problems plaguing City Hall and budget hardball or intimidation tactics. We check the record as Governor Mike Kehoe's appointees to the state-run police board demand a massive increase in city taxpayer funding. It's all coming up on The Record. Welcome to The Record. I'm Mark Maxwell. Good to be back with you. After a brief break for the Olympics, both U.S. hockey teams brought back the gold from Milan. The men's showed up in Washington, D.C. Tuesday night as President Trump basked in the glow of their gold medal glory. With poll after poll showing slumping support for the president and rising concern over high prices, Trump peddled falsehoods to try and prop up his record, pushing this false claim that every one of us can easily debunk.
Gasoline, which reached a peak of over $6 a gallon in some states under my predecessor, it was quite honestly a disaster, is now below $2.30 a gallon in most states, and in some places, $1.99 a gallon.
That's just not true. You can look yourself. The night he said that, AAA had up-to-date gas prices from all across the country. Not one state was selling gas below $2.30 a gallon. Oklahoma was the lowest at $2.37. It's up 6 cents since then in that state. The national average at $2.98. That's just one of the many claims where the president spun or misrepresented the truth or the facts as we know them. Other promises he made raised big questions about whether any president or Congress could actually deliver on them. So on Wednesday, we caught up with Congresswoman Nikki Budzinski, joining us on The Record. Congresswoman, the president said he can continue his tariffs under a different statute and that Congress doesn't actually need to take any action going forward. I wonder what that says about the popularity of those tariffs. If they were up for a vote in the House today, would they pass?
No. What they've led to is increase in taxes for working people all across this country to the tune of $1,700. And I think, first of all, this administration does have to work with Congress. That's what the Supreme Court decided. They need to work with Congress in order to implement a broad tariff strategy, as this administration has been doing. So this administration, if they want to see additional tariffs, it would be smart for them to try to work with Congress, not work against us or ignore us. And we want to do what's best for the American people. And what we know is that these tariffs are not popular because people are seeing them lead to increased grocery prices, increased costs across the board, $1,700 in tax increases.
The president also argued that more Americans are working than ever before. In raw numbers, that's technically true, but it's kind of like saying more people are alive than ever before. Population is growing. The percentages, though, in unemployment, in the workforce participation rate, they tell a very different story. The last time we saw a workforce participation rate this low was under the Gerald Ford administration. So do you think the job market is stronger or weaker today than it was a year ago?
It's weaker. And I would just specifically call out manufacturing because I have a lot of manufacturing that takes place in my district in central and southern Illinois. We've lost, since this administration took office, 170,000 manufacturing jobs. And part of the strategy as to why this administration is pursuing tariffs is they claim that's going to bring back American jobs and back American manufacturing, when the statistics and the facts don't bear that out. Specifically on manufacturing, we've lost almost 170,000 jobs. This is something that is an example of failed policy and something that I think this administration should be changing course on.
The president also called on the Senate to approve the SAVE Act. Supporters of that bill say it simply requires proof of citizenship before someone registers to vote. We know that voter ID itself polls very well in both parties. People across the board support the idea. Why did you vote against that?
I voted against it because it's a voter suppression tactic. It's a way to discourage people from being able to exercise their right to vote. When working people are struggling every day, juggling their daily lives, they want to be able and should be able to exercise their right to vote freely and fairly. And that means being able to go to the polls and vote as they are registered to vote. For married women in particular, the SAVE Act is something that would be very detrimental to women being able to to exercise their right to vote. Many married women, if they have a married or maiden name and then they change their married name, if those two last names don't match up, they're going to need to be able to find their birth certificate in order to go to vote. A lot of Americans don't have passports, for example, and that's one of the modes of ID that they might be requiring people to be able to use as proof of citizenship. This is intended to just create more additional barriers and take away the rights of the states. The states are where election law is actually passed and implemented. The Trump administration, under the SAVE Act, wants to federalize or nationalize American elections to their benefit. And so for those reasons, I cannot support a voter suppression measure like the SAVE Act.
State law in Missouri requires me to show an ID to vote here. I never had to show one to vote in Illinois. If what you're saying is true, would we see then lower voter turnout in states that do require ID?
Well, I think that that's an additional barrier for folks if they are short on time and are doing everything they can just to go and vote. I think providing that ID might be something that would be of a barrier. But I think the most important thing is every state should have the ability to make their own rules and laws and govern state elections. That's what the state of Missouri does. The state of Illinois handles it differently. It's very clear that the law is that states have the opportunity to govern their own state elections.
On prescription drugs, the president promised the lowest prices anywhere in the world. I believe right now we have the highest prices anywhere in the world, so we'd have to completely flip that. Is that goal achievable? And if so, what would it take to get it done?
Well, it will take real leadership, and that's not what we saw last night with the president's address. He talked about Trump RX. If you go onto Trump RX, it really is only going to benefit those that might be paying out of pocket directly for prescription drugs. You could be lucky and find a coupon on his website that might lead to a savings here or there. That is not the structural change that we need to make prescription drug costs lower in this country. What that will require is holding prescription drug pharmaceutical companies accountable to the prices that they're putting on their drugs, transparency, accountability. We also need to be looking at these pharmacy benefit managers to make sure that they're also transparent and accountable with their costs. We need to be negotiating over lower drug prices. It was the Democrats that actually passed into law negotiating $35 for insulin for those on Medicare. We shouldn't just stop with people that are on Medicare. We should be able to expand that kind of price cap for prescription drugs to those on private insurance plans. So I heard no fundamental real address of how we were going to be able to, or solutions, I should say, to how we're going to lower prescription drugs last night. That's what the American people deserve.
The president also framed the SNAP debate by saying he lifted 2.4 million people off of food stamps, framing that as a success. How do you see that question? Are families actually becoming more self-sufficient lifting off of the program, or are they just losing the support out from under their feet?
He's created a hunger crisis in this country that didn't exist before he took office. What I serve on the House Agriculture Committee, $189 billion cut from the SNAP program. And I will tell you, most people on SNAP are working every single day to provide food for their family. And because their jobs aren't keeping up with inflation, their wages, and because prices, because of Donald Trump's tariffs, are going up at the grocery store, they need a little bit of assistance. This isn't a handout. This is a hand up to help provide working people that are struggling in this country. And you know who doesn't need a break are the corporations and the top 1% that this president allowed when he passed his big ugly bill, the biggest transfer of wealth this country has ever seen. He gave that to corporations and the top 1% at the expense of working people that just needed a little bit of assistance with a SNAP benefit. It's disgusting.
I know we're up against the clock here, so I'll just ask one last question if I can. The president also took aim at big investment firms that buy up the housing stock. We know that can often drive housing prices up. Is that something Democrats can work with Republicans on?
Yeah, I stood and supported that last night. I agree with that. I think private equity firms should not be gobbling up affordable housing in our communities so that the average American worker can't afford to compete with a private equity firm. That's a no-brainer, and I think that's something that we should be taking action on.
President Trump also had a chance to recalibrate his tariff policy when the Supreme Court threw that out as illegal, or at least he had a chance to go back to Congress and persuade them to enact his policy and make it federal law. But he took a third route. He doubled down, chose to go it alone, and told Congress they don't need to get involved.
And then just 4 days ago, an unfortunate ruling from the United States Supreme Court. It just came down. It came down. Very unfortunate ruling. So despite the disappointing ruling, these powerful, country-saving, it's saving our country, the kind of money we're taking in. Congressional action will not be necessary. It's already time-tested and approved.
So the president thinks he can slap new tariffs on the same products coming in from the same countries, just under a different old law. And when someone sues, should it reach the Supreme Court, perhaps it will run into the same opinion, because Justice Neil Gorsuch, whom Trump put on the bench, holds the exact opposite point of view, that because this tariff and tax policy is so central to American life, then it must go through Congress. Gorsuch writes on page 74 of that court opinion, yes, legislating can be hard and take time. And yes, it can be tempting to bypass Congress when some pressing problem arises. But the deliberative nature of the legislative process was the whole point of its design. Because laws must earn such broad support to survive the legislative process, they tend to endure, allowing ordinary people to plan their lives in ways they cannot when the rules shift from day to day. Gorsuch says if history is any guide, the tables will turn, and the day will come when those disappointed by this result will appreciate the legislative process for the bulwark of liberty that it is. Coming up, a back and forth blaming on who's blowing up your bills. We dissect the Illinois governor's State of the State address. While we were away and the Winter Olympics preempted the record, Governor J.B. Pritzker delivered his 8th State of the State and budget address. And we heard the billionaire governor talking like a kitchen table populist.
Everything is just too damned expensive.
If it's expensive for the billionaires, you know it's bad. Pritzker aligned himself with the struggling masses working to afford groceries, student loans, and electric bills. The governor also squarely blamed President Trump for tariffs, taxing the cost of goods, and for starving the state of billions of dollars in federal funds.
When Donald Trump is taking resources away that are rightfully ours, none of us, Democrats or Republicans, should be okay with that. I want to say to anyone on either side of the aisle, if you want to talk about our FY 2027 budget, you must first demand the return of the money and resources this president has taken from the people of Illinois.
So I posed that very question to two of Pritzker's Republican rivals running for a chance to try and challenge him come November. What would you do to persuade the president to turn that federal funding spigot back on?
Well, Governor Pritzker's running for president. I think we all know that. He's using his current position to run against Pritzker, and to run against Trump, and he's not cooperating with the federal authorities because that suits him politically, and that hurts Illinois.
If elected governor, would you demand the Trump administration reinstate the full amount of money that Congress has promised Illinois?
Well, the reality is there's no demanding it. It's simple cooperation and filling out the paperwork and showing what all states have to show. That's what President Trump is asking for. And J.B. Pritzker's hate for President Trump is certainly so greater than that of his love for Illinois, that he's refusing this.
To be clear, when we check the record, we see the president's unilateral program and budget cuts hitting red states and blue states alike. For example, St. Louis recently lost out on a massive battery plant when the president just killed federal grant funds that Congress had already approved. There was no chance to fill out some form or paperwork to preserve that new plant.
What we're seeing is political theater. What we're seeing is folks that are looking for headlines and tweets, as opposed to doing the business of going about getting justice.
That was Congressman Wesley Bell Thursday, fresh out of the House Oversight Committee's interrogation of Hillary Clinton, the former Secretary of State. She told the panel that she had no knowledge of Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell's crimes. The hearing was overshadowed when Congresswoman Lauren Boebert of Colorado violated committee rules and took a picture of the former First Lady, sharing that image with a right-wing social media influencer. Missouri's congressional filing window is open. That means if you want to run for office, get ready. But candidates are starting to run for office while under a cloud of legal limbo and uncertainty. A judge has yet to rule on a challenge from the ACLU of Missouri. They were challenging the state's new Republican-drawn map, especially carving up the Kansas City district. And with the filing window closing at the end of next month, time is running short for the court to sort all that out. With that said, if you'd like to run for office in Missouri's midterm election, you have until the end of next week to submit your papers with the Secretary of State. So far, you see it here, a rematch. Congresswoman Cori Bush has filed her papers to appear on the ballot across from incumbent Congressman Wesley Bell. On the other side of the state, 5 Republicans have lined up to run in that newly redrawn district we told you about. They might have a chance to challenge longtime incumbent Democrat Emanuel Cleaver if that district holds up under court review. Years without enforcement, millions of uncollected fines, why the city stopped enforcing traffic violations and when it might kick back up again. We can now report that car that became a symbol of city inaction is finally gone after our investigation aired. Just hours later, the car was towed away to the tow lot. Our report revealed that one vehicle alone had racked up nearly $9,000 in tickets while sitting there untouched for 9 months. It was part of a backlog of some 40,000 cars eligible for a boot and a boot program that sat dormant for 8 years. Comptroller Donna Behringer now reacting to our reporting, saying it raises serious concerns about whether the system is being properly managed and whether the city is receiving the revenue it depends on. The mayor went further. She's calling for a structural change in who runs the whole program.
It's not only missed revenue, Mark. I mean, these cars are literally littering our streets. I personally think that it's quite unfortunate and ridiculous that parking enforcement is handled in a siloed office that isn't controlled by the mayor's office.
The question now, will this be a one-car fix or a systemic one? We'll keep pressing for results you can measure. A budget battle at City Hall. We check the police board's math when we check the record next. The St. Louis Board of Police Commissioners met Wednesday to hammer out their very first budget proposal. And remember all those concerns about perceived conflicts of interest with business owners who sit on that board and whose companies do business with the police department? We were told those concerns would be addressed, and perhaps in due time they will be. But one line item in this proposed spending plan jumps off the page at you. The police board wants to dramatically increase fleet spending. We checked the record. This year's budget shows they spent $2.2 million a year on those squad cars. Next year, they want to jump that number up to spend $5.3 million. Historically, most of that business has gone to Don Brown Chevrolet. Don Brown is a non-voting member of the police board. That means he doesn't vote. That's true. But the dealership still gets paid. One explosive moment during that budget hearing raised new questions about the motives of other board members, too. The attorney appointed by the governor, Chris Greville, who led most of that meeting, offered up the casual suggestion that maybe, just maybe, city marshals and park rangers protecting City Hall and city parks could be just line itemed out of the budget. Don't worry, they clarified later on, they're not going to discontinue that protection. The marshals and rangers will still show up, but the police department might just consider that protection an additional service they provide and send an invoice to City Hall to charge them again. So your protection won't go away, we'll just bill you double for it. I feel like I saw that episode of The Sopranos. Our regular viewers will remember when another guy who wore a badge tried to tell City Hall, if you want me to transport prisoners, you'd better pony up the extra money for it. Ask Sheriff Montgomery how that turned out. Now, maybe we could chalk all this up to just hardball budget negotiations. The police board had to stake out a position somehow. They go high, the city goes low, right? They just meet in the middle at the end. But consider this. When the governor appointed these commissioners, he highlighted their experience in business. What businesses? Board president Chris Saraceno happens to run Campbell Security Group. It's a private security firm that employs off-duty police officers. Businesses want extra security over and above what the police can provide. They hire Chris's guys. Just put him on your company payroll. And now his lawyer at the police board suggests, hey, maybe those city cops and marshals and rangers, they'll still show up and protect public spaces if City Hall gives them a little extra money on the side. The mayor asked, what if the police were to make that same argument about protecting, say, city streets? Or how would the public react if that same suggestion were one day made to a local business? Hey, sorry, the police couldn't make it, but for the low, low price of $59.99, my guys will come with concierge service. To be clear, there's no evidence that anyone on the police board has made such a suggestion to a private business owner. But if they're willing to say that in public on the record, with cameras rolling, then what should a business owner think if they start to notice fewer patrols in their part of town? It's the incentive structure here that invites those uncomfortable questions. Public safety is just that, public. The moment it becomes someone's vehicle for profit, the moment you start selling it like a cable package, you want parks? That's going to cost you extra. You can be sure this town will notice. That's our time. Until next time, we're off the record.